Hello, welcome to lesson number 23, and this lesson is entitled Data Integrity. The following are some of the objectives or points that we will cover as part of this lesson. I'll go through data integrity and just explain a little bit about the background and the priorities around good data integrity. I'll give some examples of data integrity problems as well as some recent FDA inspection findings. We'll go through some GMP regulations and discuss some barriers and problems that are associated with ensuring data integrity. I'll break down some data integrity issues into subsections, including raw data, documentation, lab investigations, as well as electronic data issues, and give some examples of all of these. Finally, we'll discuss some FDA audit observations and conclude the lesson. So just as an introduction to data integrity, it's important to understand that the basic principle of assuring the quality of healthcare products is the review of the data by industry of manufacturing data as well as testing data, and this data is also inspected by an independent quality function or QA department within the company. And finally, all of the data is inspected by regulators who are responsible for monitoring the products coming out of the facility to ensure they're fit for purpose. So the accuracy and trustworthiness of the data, the integrity of the data must never be in question, or all of the checks and balances, control measures and quality agreements will not be effective then. So data integrity is assuming greater importance in CGMPs. Quality of raw materials and in-process materials, as well as finished goods, cannot be assured without data integrity. Data integrity issues are 21 CFR Part 11 and severe CGMP violations. If the integrity of laboratory data is compromised, products may not comply with regulatory authorizations, and therefore products cannot be released for sale. In the past, FDA has increased its focus on data integrity and reliability, and similarly the MHRA, which is the Irish Regulatory Board, and other regulatory agencies have increased their focus on data integrity during audits. Inspectors are examining data based on multiple regulations and standards, for example, current good manufacturing practice, good laboratory practice, as well as good clinical practice. And I suppose the view that auditors take is you're guilty until proven innocent approach. So historical approaches based on technical justification and scientific rationale is no longer adequate. Emphasis is on providing evidence that the analytical results are not fraudulent, and that's the way forward for auditing now. So this acronym of ALCOA is the approach that's taken to ensure that data is reliable and it maintains its integrity at all times. So data must be attributable, it must be legible, it must be original, accurate and contemporaneous. So this is something that will be looked at more closely during audits, this ALCOA acronym. So some of the regulations that I've included here are listed again. I won't go into all of them, but one of them that's probably new to us is this MHRA guidance document. And this is the regulatory document that's used for inspections, and it's used or referenced back to integrity of data. It's worth going through this document. It's quite detailed, and if you get time to look through it, it would be a good one to look through. We've already looked at this FDA guidance document in the past, as well as this WHO guidance document, and this one is in relation to good record keeping and good practices. So some of the regulatory trends that are seen during auditing would include things like warning letters issued in relation to poor documentation practice, as well as 483 observations during FDA audits. It would also include European non-compliance reports and WHO decertifications. So there are some serious implications to poor data integrity findings during audits. So this slide includes some of the examples of data integrity problems. I'll read through them briefly, but it covers everything from data integrity associated with manual entries as well as electronic entries. So we have things like security breaches of physical plant or information systems, site access to individuals without secure ID, uncontrolled or unrecorded access to restricted rooms such as data centers or manufacturing suites, or even document storage centers, sharing of passwords among chemists or analysts, and sharing of log-on IDs, excuse me, employees logged into unattended computer terminals, no requirements for periodic password updates, lack of employee ownership and accountability, improper data manipulation, adjustment of time clocks, backdating of information, creating records after the fact, excluding adverse information or discarding or destroying original records, data systems not accurate, reliable, nor fit for their intended use, uncontrolled or haphazard backup or restore, copying and archiving of data, no review of electronic records by supervisory personnel, and audit trails not maintained or reviewed. So some recent FDA inspection findings, again, these can be found on the FDA website. I've picked a few of them out here to just highlight some of the data integrity issues, like poor documentation practices, batch records found in the bin, which don't match original or official records, photocopied labels with information filled out in advance of the activity occurring, data recorded for a microbial test with no sample plates found in the incubator, microbial contamination recorded in an unofficial notebook but not found in any GMP documentation, and lack of second-person verification of data, poor laboratory practices, manipulation of integration settings on HPLC or GC to achieve passing results, retesting samples outside the quality system until a passing result is achieved, using multiple what we call trial or setup or training injections on an instrument before you record the single result, use of analytical methods that are not validated, security breaches of physical plant or information systems, using administrator access to overwrite analyst results, and deletion of raw data or unfavorable results. So when you're being audited by a regulatory body and you have breaches of data or breaches of data integrity, the kind of things that regulators we'll see more often than not is things like backdating of data or fabricating or falsifying data or results, things like rerunning samples when you get a failing result without carrying out a formal investigation, or discarding data that's outside specification or data that fails spec for any reason, releasing of failing results, or testing samples into compliance would be another one that's normally picked up or highlighted during audits, not saving electronic or hard copy data. These are the kind of things that are very visible to auditors. So some of the criteria for maintaining integrity of lab data would be to ensure that the data is attributable. So who acquired the data or who performed an action and when the action was performed. Make sure your data is legible. Can you read the data and all laboratory notebook entries? So make sure it's concise and legible. Contemporaneous, so documented at the time of the activity, the time the activity was performed, not before and not after the activity. Make sure your data is original, so the written, printout, certified copy is included. So you don't record your data on pieces of paper, on backs of envelopes, or on post-its, or on the sleeve of your lab coat, but they must be recorded in your lab notebook or on electronic media, or in the LIMS system, the Laboratory Information Management System. Your data must be accurate, so no errors or editing without documented amendments. So if there is a mistake made, we would have covered this in good documentation practice. You cross it out, you sign and date it, and you give a reason for that change. Make sure your data is complete. All data, including any repeats or any reanalysis or any deviation records that are performed on the sample, need to be included. Make sure your data is consistent. All elements of the analysis, such as the sequence of events, your sample prep, your dilutions, your weighouts, they're all dated and time-stamped in the expected sequence. And finally, make sure your data is available for review and during audits or inspections over the lifetime of the data, so that the analytical scientists can understand the sequence of events and can apply them in their respective analytical methods, so that it's easy to follow in years to come. So some of the GMP regulatory requirements are listed here, specific to the 21 CFR reg documents. If we go in here, again, they're all listed here under the different chapters. You can go in and take a look at the ones that we're interested in, but in the presentation I've listed each individual chapter, so you can follow through and read more information on those. So just to highlight, the instruments must be qualified and fit for purpose, which is one of the reg requirements of the CFR documents. Your software must be validated. All calculations used must be verified by the analyst and subsequently second person verified by a second independent analyst, signed and dated. Data generated in an analysis must be backed up. Reagents and reference solutions are prepared correctly with appropriate records. Methods used must be documented and approved. Methods must be verified under actual conditions of use, and this would be specific for, say, compendia methods. Data generated and transformed must meet the criterion of scientific soundness. Test data must be accurate and complete and follow procedures. data and the reportable value must be checked by a second individual to ensure accuracy, completeness and conformance with procedure. So some of the barriers or the difficulties associated with ensuring data integrity would be data integrity can be compromised in a number of ways, including human error. When data is entered by mistake, which would be a common error, you accidentally press the wrong number on your calculator or on your keyboard. Maybe you're unaware of the regulatory requirements, you've had poor training, or human error involved with willfully falsifying results, which could be considered to be fraudulent with intent to deceive. Selection of good or passing results to the exclusion of those that are poor or failing. So if you're doing a dissolution test, you have 6 results, so you can select which ones you want. That would be considered a compromise in data integrity because you must report all individual results. Unauthorized changes to data made post-acquisition. Errors that occur when data is transmitted from one computer to another. Changes to data through software bugs or malfunctions of which the user is not aware. General hardware malfunctions might cause data integrity issues. Changes in technology where one item is replaced when it becomes obsolete or no longer supported, making old records unreadable or inaccessible. Possible data integrity problems. So according to the FDA, the following are possible data integrity problems in the lab that have been observed in the past. So alteration of raw original data and records, for example, the use of Tipp-Ex or correction fluid, multiple analysis of assays with the same sample without adequate justification, manipulation of a poorly defined analytical procedure and associated data analysis in order to obtain passing results, backdating stability test results to meet the required commitments, creating acceptable test results without performing the test, using test results from previous batches to substitute testing for another batch. So I'm just going to go into delve a little bit deeper into the issues associated with raw data, and the following are a list of some of the common issues that we might see in the laboratory. So for raw data, we can see things like no data recorded for your standard prep, for example your weighing procedure, quantities weighed or volumes used, no raw data for sample weight again, which is important, or even details of the balance used, no raw data for sample solution prep and sample dilutions. Sample and reagent weights are written on small pieces of paper or post-its and transcribed onto analytical worksheets, and then the small pieces of paper are discarded. Auditors love looking in bins for that reason. Destruction of raw data not meeting specification or missing raw data from notebooks, or rewriting laboratory notebooks where you're transcribing from one notebook to another. Unjustified invalidation of data and retesting without a laboratory investigation or deviation. And again, raw data found in the bin, or even raw data found in analysts' work area or in their drawers, or sometimes in their lockers. Again, following on with raw data or with documentation, pre-post dating of records, failure to use approved procedures, recording signing for other analysts, rewriting the records without authorization, failure to report or document a discrepancy, failure to retain raw data or records. Laboratory investigation data, things like out of specifications or undesired results being ignored and not investigated. So retesting without justification, releasing product despite failing tests or failing sterility tests in this example, failing or suspect HPLC assay results being overwritten. Evidence did not support the reason to invalidate a dissolution test result or a test result in general. Test results discarded with no investigation reasons given. Finally, electronic data. So things like HPLC or GC integration parameters changed and rerun until passing results are obtained. Audit trail function being disabled on the instrument or on the software. Unofficial testing of samples with file names like test, trial, demo at the beginning of a run. There are no controls to prohibit unauthorized changes to electronic data or inadequate access controls. Files being saved on personal computers instead of on a network. Sharing passwords or unauthorized access between analysts. Lack of security on electronic data systems. And finally, failure to maintain or back up electronic data. So just a few little snapshot of some FDA observations that are found include things like trial injections, which we've spoken about, failing test results being retested until acceptable results are obtained, overwriting electronic raw data, out of specifications not investigated as per procedure number XYZ, appropriate controls not established, records are not completed contemporaneously, observed backdated entries in logbooks. So some of the consequences then of poor data integrity would be loss of trust with the regulators, recall of product or issuing 483s from FDA or warning letters, import alerts and seizure of products, non-conformance reports, notice of concerns, which are public information, loss of jobs, loss of business, loss of money, a drop in share prices. So the consequences are numerous. So some of the approaches that we can use to ensure consistent data integrity would be things like the first one is to prevent. And to prevent data integrity issues, we look at personnel, both internal and external personnel, as well as training of them. So we need to enforce high levels of ethical standards and integrity within the company, and train all employees on proper handling and reporting of data. The emphasis should be that everybody within the company is responsible to ensure data integrity at all times. Validation then would be ensuring your computerized systems are validated for intended use, and identify the risks. So what are the controls to prevent data integrity issues, or what are the controls to detect data integrity issues? How do you identify critical data and records, and how do you put in place a good backup and recovery system for your electronic data? Security controls then would be to protect at the physical level, which would be your building level, so secure access, swipe card access into the buildings, and protect at your information level, which would be your network level. So access controls, so user access or password controls are important, and also think about cyber security to protect data from the outside. Detect things then, so continual monitoring would include things like audits, so audit programs using auditors qualified by education, experience and training to evaluate systems used for collecting, analysing, reporting and retaining information and data. Data review, so good documentation practices, system audit trails and data audit trails, and finally correct. So if you do find some data integrity issues within your company, you correct them through governance, findings and actions. So develop data integrity policies and procedures to address data ownership throughout its life cycle. Consider the design, operation and monitoring of processes over intentional and unintentional changes to information. So always investigate, correct and prevent as and when. And if warranted, conduct an in-depth documented investigation of any alleged instances of falsification or fabrication or misconduct involving data integrity issues at all times. So in conclusion, it's important to remember that the integrity of data generated by any regulated laboratory is a prime factor in determining the credibility of that laboratory. The findings of a single instance where data integrity is compromised casts a shadow over the whole of the data generated. It's important that we remember inspections and audits can only sample. Finding one instance of falsification raises the question of how many more instances of non-compliance exist. Therefore, ensuring data integrity is of major importance to analytical scientists, managers and quality assurances departments in any organisation, as the consequences of getting it wrong are very costly and it will take a long time to rebuild regulatory trust. The extended FDA regulations and draft guidance now also impact laboratory data integrity issues, as failure to provide complete records means that any drugs are now classified as adulterated under the new extension of the Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act amended in 2012, the link being included here in the slide. Data integrity issue is prevalent globally and not merely within Ireland or within Europe. If the pharmaceutical industry in any country is engaged in the production of life-saving drugs, then it cannot afford to be negligent with respect to integrity of its data. And that's the final slide. Thank you for listening.